Every empire thought it was too rich to fall until inflation devoured its middle class. From the marble columns of Rome to the steel skyscrapers of New York, a hidden financial virus has brought every global power to its knees. It's not war, famine, or plague. It's the slow, silent death of money. Today, we're going to trace this cycle through Rome, Spain, Britain, and even modern America to see how history is repeating itself right now. Hey guys, welcome back to Mystic Historian. If you love uncovering the hidden financial patterns that shaped our world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell because today, we're decoding the secret weapon that ended empires. Let's start in Rome, the birthplace of inflation. At its peak, the Roman Empire was an economic marvel. Its lifeblood was the denarius, a silver coin trusted from Britain to Egypt. This stable currency fueled trade, built cities, and supported a prosperous middle class of merchants, artisans, and leaders. The denarius was real money, with about 95% pure silver. It was a promise of value you could hold in your hand. But empires are expensive. Endless wars on the frontiers, massive building projects in the capital, and a growing bureaucracy all demanded more and more money. The Roman government faced a problem. It was spending more than it earned. So, the emperors found a clever, destructive solution. They started debasing the currency. They recalled the pure silver denarii, melted them down, mixed them with cheap metals like copper, and reminted more coins than they started with. At first, no one noticed, but as years went by, the silver content plummeted. Under Emperor Nero, it was 90%. By the time of Caracalla, it was 50%. By the late 3rd century, the denarius was a copper coin with a thin silver wash less than 5% pure silver. This was the ancient world's version of printing money. The government created cheap money to fund the empire, but in doing so, it destroyed the wealth of its own people. The consequences were catastrophic for the Roman middle class. Imagine being a soldier whose life savings were in denarii. Suddenly, those coins bought less and less bread, oil, and wine. Your wages were the same, but prices for everything were skyrocketing. Merchants who accepted denarii in payment found the coins were worthless by the time they used them to buy new goods. Faith in the currency evaporated. Real wealth fled to the elite, the senators and aristocrats who owned land, gold, and other hard assets that couldn't be debased. They were protected from inflation. But the middle class and the poor, whose entire lives were tied to the cash economy, were utterly crushed by hyperinflation. They lost their savings, their businesses, and their economic security. This economic collapse triggered a social and moral one. With the currency worthless, trade broke down. Food shortages led to riots. The government imposed strict price controls, which only created black markets and more scarcity. Trust in the state vanished. In a single 50-year period known as the crisis of the 3rd century, more than 20 emperors were assassinated. The political instability was a direct result of the economic chaos. Rome wasn't ultimately conquered by barbarians from the outside. It was hollowed out from the inside. The empire fell every single time its money lost value. Now, let's fast forward 1,200 years to 16th century Spain. After the discovery of the Americas, Spain became the richest empire on earth. Literal rivers of gold and silver flowed from the mines of Peru and Mexico into the Spanish treasury. This unprecedented wealth funded a lavish lifestyle for the monarchy, massive European wars, and a powerful global navy. Spain seemed invincible, an empire blessed by divine fortune. But this flood of gold and silver created a new kind of problem. It was too much of a good thing. The massive influx of precious metals dramatically increased the money supply across Europe. This triggered what historians call the price revolution. With so much more money chasing the same amount of goods, prices exploded. In just 100 years, prices for everyday items quadrupled. This was a level of inflation Europe had never seen before. For the Spanish middle class, the weavers, farmers, and craftsmen, it was a disaster. Their wages couldn't keep up with the soaring cost of living. At the same time, because Spain was so rich with gold, it was cheaper to import everything cloth from the Netherlands, tools from Germany, grain from France then to make it at home. Spain's local industries collapsed. Why work to produce something when you could just buy it with gold from the New World? This is the great paradox. Gold made Spain poor. The real, productive economy was hollowed out, replaced by a total dependence on foreign goods and colonial treasure. The nobles and the crown hoarded the gold, while ordinary citizens faced scarcity and poverty. The empire was rich on paper, but bankrupt in reality. All that gold was spent on endless, pointless wars, draining the treasury faster than the treasure fleets could refill it. The fall was inevitable and brutal. The Spanish crown declared bankruptcy not once, not twice, but 4 times in less than a century. It defaulted on its debts, shattering its credibility. The economic collapse led to the loss of its colonies and its status as a global power. Inflation, born from an excess of wealth, became the silent weapon of Spain's self-destruction. The empire had found infinite gold and, in the process, it lost infinite value. Next, we sailed to the British Empire, the superpower that ruled a quarter of the world's population. Britain's rise wasn't built on gold from colonies, but on something far more powerful: industry, global trade, and the pound sterling. Backed by a disciplined gold standard, the pound was the world's reserve currency. London was the undisputed financial capital of the globe. If you wanted to do business anywhere, you did it in pounds. But this era of dominance was shattered by the 20th century's 2 world wars. These conflicts were unimaginably expensive, and Britain had to pay for them somehow. It drained its gold reserves, sold off its overseas assets, and borrowed heavily, especially from the United States. To fund the war effort at home, it did what every overextended empire does. It printed money and sold bonds, effectively inflating its currency. The breaking point came in 1931. With its gold reserves nearly gone, Britain officially abandoned the gold standard. The pound was no longer redeemable for a fixed amount of gold. It became a fiat currency, its value determined by government promise alone. Inflation immediately began eating away at the savings of middle-class families. The value they had stored in pounds for generations started to disappear. The empire's debts skyrocketed, and Britain could no longer afford to maintain its vast network of colonies, which began breaking away one by one. The final blow came after World War II. A battered and bankrupt Britain was forced to hand over the keys to the global financial system to the United States at the Bretton Woods Conference. The US dollar, then still backed by gold, replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. The sun had finally set on the British Empire. Britain's empire didn't collapse from a foreign invasion. It sold its gold, and with it, it sold its power. This brings us to America, and a question: are we living in the final chapter of this recurring story? After World War II, America inherited Britain's throne as the world's banker. The US dollar, backed by the largest gold reserve in history, became the foundation of global trade under the Bretton Woods Agreement. But the cost of the Vietnam War and growing social spending put the US in the same position as Rome and Britain. It was spending more than it had. Foreign countries, holding mountains of dollars, started demanding gold in exchange. The U.S. gold supply began to dwindle. In 1971, President Nixon made a fateful decision. He closed the gold window, officially ending the dollar's convertibility to gold. The dollar became a pure fiat currency. This was the Nixon shock. To ensure the world would still need dollars, the U.S. struck a deal with Saudi Arabia in 1973. All oil would be priced and traded exclusively in U.S. dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. It created a permanent global demand for dollars, allowing the U.S. to print money to pay for its imports and export its inflation to the rest of the world. This led to the new empire of debt. Easy credit, relentless money printing, and endless government spending became the norm. Just like in Rome, this system squeezed the middle class. Prices for housing, education, and healthcare soared, while wages for the average worker stagnated. And, just like in Rome, real wealth flowed to the owners of assets, stocks, real estate, and commodities which, are protected from inflation. We are seeing the modern version of the Roman pattern. In the 2020s, this cycle hit a crisis point. In response to economic shutdowns, the government created trillions of new dollars, an unprecedented expansion of the money supply. The result was predictable: the worst inflation crisis in 40 years. We are now in the classic inflation trap. Our economy is so dependent on debt that the only way to pay the interest on old debt is to issue new debt, which requires printing more money, which causes more inflation. Empires don't die, they devalue. So, what's the pattern here? It's a universal cycle. An empire rises on productivity and sound money. It grows through expansion, but eventually overextends itself. To pay for its ambitions, it abandons sound money and starts printing. This leads to inflation, which silently destroys the savings and security of the middle class, the backbone of the nation. As the middle class collapses, so does social trust and political stability, paving the way for the empire's fall. The silent victim is always the middle class. They are the producers, the taxpayers, and the soldiers. History's greatest warning is that real national power doesn't come from military might or lavish spending, but from preserving the value of its money and the prosperity of its people. Today, we face this cycle again, but with new tools: digital currencies, AI-driven economies, and the slow erosion of the dollar's global dominance. The question for us is, are we doomed to repeat this ancient mistake? Or can we finally learn the lesson that Rome, Spain, and Britain learned too late? Every empire thinks its currency is eternal until... Thanks for watching, Mystic Historian. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dives into the patterns of power and history. See you next time.